You know, we all love a good business model. They're clean, they're predictable, they give us a neat little map for how the world is supposed to work. But what happens when the real world, in all its messy glory, just completely ignores the map? Today, we're diving into a fascinating story about a massive industrial giant that seems to have broken all the rules, and in doing so, teaches us a powerful lesson about strategy. And make no mistake, the stakes here are incredibly high. The history of business is just littered with the ghosts of companies that couldn't adapt their tech strategy. Getting this stuff wrong isn't just a little oopsie, it can be a fatal blow. It really is about survival, which is exactly why we rely on these models to guide us. Or at least that's what we thought.
All right, so let's start with the rulebook. For decades now, there's been this one really powerful model that managers have leaned on to figure out how industries are supposed to grow and change. It's called the Abernathy-Utterback model, and you can pretty much think of it like a roadmap for an industry's life. It predicts this really consistent, almost linear path that technology follows as it matures. It's supposed to tell you what to focus on and when. Sounds useful, right?
So the model lays out this super clean three-step progression. First, you've got the fluid phase. This is the Wild West. Tons of experimentation, lots of different product ideas floating around. Then, a winner emerges, what they call a dominant design. Think of the QWERTY keyboard. Once that happens, you're in the transitional phase. The focus isn't on what you're making anymore, but how efficiently you can make it. And finally, you land in the specific phase, where it's all about one thing, squeezing out every last drop of efficiency through cost-cutting and massive scale. And here's the absolute key takeaway from the model. It predicts a one-way street. Companies are supposed to start with flexible, do-it-all systems and inevitably move toward rigid, highly specialized, and super expensive equipment. It's a journey from open-ended exploration to locked-in exploitation. But does it really always work that way? Okay, so now let's throw this neat and tidy theory into the ring with a real-world heavyweight, a company that zigged when the model screamed zag. Let's talk about Électricité de France, better known as EDF. This company was created right after World War II, and it's been the major player in French energy for, well, over 75 years. I mean, it is the textbook example of a mature company in a mature industry. It's the kind of place where the Abernathy-Utterback model should fit like a glove. But then you look at what they actually did. This timeline is anything but a straight line. In the 50s, they went all in on hydropower. Super specific, super capital intensive. According to the model, they were basically starting the game in the final phase. But then, in the 60s, they went backwards? They shifted to more flexible, lower-cost fuel oil plants. Then, bam, they swing dramatically back to the most specific, most expensive option imaginable, nuclear power. And today, they're diversifying again, back toward more flexible options. This isn't a one-way street, it's a total zigzag. So there you have it, the core of the problem. The theory predicts this nice, straight road to specialization. But EDF's reality? It was this winding, back-and-forth journey. The model just doesn't fit. It's broken, at least for this case. Which, of course, leads us to the billion-dollar question. If one of the most trusted models for innovation can't explain what EDF was doing, then what can? What was the real logic driving these absolutely massive strategic bets? Well, the answer turns out to have very little to do with the technology life cycle itself, and absolutely everything to do with how the company's definition of success kept changing. When researchers really dug into this, they realized EDF wasn't following some predetermined technological path. No, they were chasing a moving target. What it meant to be an excellent company, to do a great job for the nation of France, was constantly shifting based on the massive pressures of the world around them. So, let's break it down era by era. First up, the years right after the war. The goal here wasn't just about profits or market share. It was something so much bigger than that. Think about it. France had been devastated by war. The absolute #1 priority was to rebuild a country and, crucially, to secure its own energy supply. In that context, hydropower was the perfect choice. Yeah, building those dams was insanely expensive and took forever, but they ran on French water, not on fuel they had to buy from someone else. When the goal is national security, that kind of specific long-term investment is the definition of excellence. But, of course, the world doesn't stand still. By the 1960s, France was in the middle of an economic boom, and the definition of a job well done changed right along with it. All of a sudden, the top priority wasn't just independence anymore. It was about expanding the grid as fast as possible and keeping prices low to fuel all that growth. And with oil prices at an all-time low, the most
excellent tool for that job was fuel oil plants. They were relatively cheap, they were fast to build, and that freed up a ton of cash to modernize the power grid. The goal changed, and the best technology changed with it.
And then, just when everything seemed to be humming along, the world changed again, and this time it changed violently. This crisis kicked off the third, and probably most famous chapter in France's energy story.
The 1973 oil crisis sent a massive shockwave across the entire planet. The price of oil went through the roof, and that strategy of relying on cheap foreign fuel, it suddenly looked like a massive critical vulnerability. And just like that, the #1 priority snapped right back to national energy independence. The tool for this new, harsh reality? Nuclear power. It was an unbelievable bet, a huge, capital-intensive gamble, but it promised France decades of stable power, completely insulated from the crazy swings of the global oil market. Once again, excellence had been redefined.
When you lay it all out like this on a table, the whole thing just clicks, doesn't it? The technology choice was never, ever about following some pre-written script in a business textbook. It was always a direct, logical response to what success meant in that specific moment in history. When independence was king, they chose massive, long-term bets like hydro and nuclear. When speed and low cost were the name of the game, they chose flexible fuel oil. The strategy was driving the technology, not the other way around.
So what's the big lesson we can pull from EDF's wild ride? Well, it's a really powerful reminder about strategy that goes way beyond any single simple model.
First off, models are great guides, but they are not gospel. The real world is just way too messy for that. Second, and this is huge, there's no such thing as the best technology in a vacuum. The best choice is always relative to what you're trying to achieve right now. And that brings us to the most important point. A great strategy has to be contingent. That's just a fancy way of saying it has to adapt and be shaped by the unique context, the specific pressures, and the shifting goals of its time.
And hey, don't just take it from me. The author of the study, Pascal Corbel, summed it up perfectly. This case is a call to arms for a more flexible, context-aware way of thinking about strategy.
So I'll leave you with this question to chew on. When you look at your own company or your own industry, are the strategies you see built to fit a nice, clean textbook model? Or are they built to be agile enough, to be tough enough, to handle the messy, unpredictable, and constantly changing reality of the real world?